everyone. So if you've been keeping up on my community posts, you know I'm finally trying to go through Darth Plagueis once again. If you don't remember, a few years ago I was trying to go through Darth Plagueis, the novel, not the character, but he, of course he's in the novel. But I didn't get past, I think it was chapter 7, and I tried to go through, I think it was chapter 8 last year, and I just couldn't even get halfway through it. I only got about that far. So I decided, and I did try to go through the book again earlier this year, but I didn't get past chapter 1. So I'm finally, or was it November last year? Don't remember. But I'm finally trying to finish the book. So if you've been keeping up on my community posts, you know I've done some sketches of Plagueis himself and the prologue. They should be on screen. They should be appearing on screen now. I'm probably not going to do one for chapter 1 for this video. You may see that next video though, if I do it. But yeah, this is going to be my reviews on each chapter. So I'm going to cover both the prologue and chapter 1 here. I've gone through both today. So the prologue is it's quite interesting. It kind of shows the moments after Plagueis' death and the perspective of Palpatine in that, and you can't get to see into his mind, his concern, the kind of power that Plagueis has, how his death sent a tremor through the planet of Coruscant. He doesn't specify the planet in the book, but we know it's Coruscant, so that really annoyed me when I was first reading the book. It only referred to it as the planet, not Coruscant, which made it really So for anyone that wants to read through the prologue, that wants to get through the book, no, the prologue takes place on Coruscant. Yeah, if you get really annoyed by how do I know what I'm looking at, especially in Star Wars, you know, the different settings look different. So yeah, it takes place on Coruscant in an apartment, to make that clear. So it's quite interesting. We get to see Palpatine's fear that Plagueis might have survived, how cautious he is of that reality when trying to check Plagueis, see if he's alive. And we get to see his relief and his feeling of triumph, and it's quite interesting. And there's a funny line early on in the prologue where they refer to his hands being manicured, and I always find Palpatine doing everyday stuff or normal stuff to just be absolutely hysterical. It sounds absolutely ridiculous and hilarious, and it sounds completely out of character for him to do any of that, and I always find that funny when they refer to him having something that, or doing something that seems normal to us. It just doesn't feel right to the character, if that makes sense. So I find the idea of him having his hands manicured to be quite funny. There's not too much to really say on the prologue. There's not a whole lot in it. It's only about 3 and a bit pages long. It's only like 2 lines on that 4th page. So it's not that long. But it's an interesting segue. We get to see how the dark side kind of welcomes Palpatine as the new leader of the Sith, and you get to see Palpatine's wonder of, did Plagueis feel that same wonder? Did Plagueis feel that same welcoming? And he felt. And did he feel that same amount of power that Palpatine felt like he was being engulfed in? It's an interesting perspective, and some interesting insight into how the Sith experience killing their masters, because we usually just see him kill them, or we hear about them killing them, and we just accept it. But it's interesting to get a more personal and in-depth look into that. Then we get to chapter 1. And I see it as I think it's a good introduction to the characters of Plagueis and Tenebrous. Maybe not so much Tenebrous, as he dies at the end, spoilers, but we get to kind of see a bit of their relationship, how they have a bit of respect for each other, but they're also at each other's necks a bit. Tenebris is kind of having to hold back Plagueis' I guess instinct. He's a bit challenging of Plagueis, not quite fully understanding Plagueis' motives, and it's even referred to later in the chapter that his lack of faith blinded his thoughts of Plagueis and his ability to really understand, I guess, what Plagueis was going to do and what he was probably doing. And I guess that's reflected in those scenes from earlier on. I've literally only just read the chapter, so, I'm kind of coming to these conclusions. And it's interesting to see what their relationship was like, because I know bits that are going to happen later on in the book, but we know that Plagueis and Tenebris were kind of at each other's throats a lot. So, like, we know Darth Plagueis is going to appear later on. Well, I know. And how Tenebris trains him to kind of get Plagueis and to try and see who would be the better apprentice for him. And it's interesting to see how Plagueis, he's at times wiser, which is funny because Darth Plagueis is wise, but he's at times a little bit wiser than Tenebris. He's more reasonable at times, whereas Tenebris is kind of like the leading force. Plagueis gives that guidance where Tenebris starts to get a bit lost, and they really do feel like they aren't complete without the other. So it's going to be interesting to see how Plagueis manages without Tenebris being there to kind of be that leading force, and him being there to kind of set his directions correctly. We also get the mention of cortosis, which is, again, one of those things in Star Wars lore that is probably come into a lot more relevance since the Acolyte, with the Stranger, and they're on Baldemnik, which is, of course, the planet theorised to be what Kamir and Osha are on in the Acolyte. But it's interesting to see, to say the least, to see just how Plagueis and Tenebris interact and how they're talking about the past with Bane, and how it's very apt for them to be mining cortosis like Bane once did before he was a Sith. And it's a good bit of, you get a bit of idea of what the past is of Star Wars, the history of the Sith, but it doesn't go too far into that. It's still relevant to the present. They're not relying too much on telling you what's happened previously in the lore. They're giving just enough context and mentions for what the Sith are, what they're doing, and why they're doing it. And it's very interesting, but they don't go too far into that. They don't have a whole flashback scene or anything. They don't start. It doesn't become the centre focus. You just get enough, and they stay relevant to what they're doing, which is mining cortosis. And then it starts to get interesting with the probe, I guess, being sabotaged in some sort, or something like that, by subtext mining, and it's very interesting. It is. It's interesting to see what they're going to be doing with that. Were they intentionally trying to kill Ego Damask and Ruger Snow? Those are the actual names of Plagueis and Tenebris. Do they have some sort of prejudice? I think I got that right. Prejudice against them? What is it? Sorry, setting my microphone so it doesn't turn off. It's what is it? What are they doing? Why are they trying to? Why to not respond to I guess the supervisor droids. I don't know what it's called. Tread droids. That's what it was. Tread droids. Why wasn't it responding to the tread droid? it's interesting to see how they're going to do that. Does that play into the assassination attempts later on in the book that I know is going to happen? It's got an interesting start. I'm someone who hasn't gone through the Bane books. I haven't gone through the Darth Bane books. One of my friends, I'm fairly sure he's going through them at the moment, but I haven't gone through them. And so getting this bit of backstory on Bane is interesting. It gives a bit more context to bits and pieces. I don't think the context is necessary, but they do it in such a way where it's interesting and it makes you want to know more. It doesn't feel like it's harming the story, but it also, and it feels like even though you don't need it, it's giving you a bit of benefits, a bit more understanding, and I think that's what makes this first chapter quite good in its use of the past and how it uses the present. And we get to see more of how Plagueis and Tenebrous are kind of at odds again at each other, with how once Tenebrous is dying, he starts to challenge Plagueis once he realises their ship has been crushed, and how just at odds they can be with each other, and how I guess Plagueis is a bit smug about it, saying, "Oh, I'll find my way home, don't you worry." And we also get to see the kind of, I guess the beginning of that, well, not really the beginning, but you know what I mean, the kind of start, at least in the book, of Plagueis' fascination with midichlorians, and how at the moment he can't manipulate them yet. He will later on apparently, but he is only able to really view their activity, how they react, how they work. It's mysterious but interesting, and talking about it actually makes me want to read it more to know what's going on. I think I guess these reviews turn out to be a little bit better than I was expecting. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see just how Plagueis manages without Tenebrous. How is he going to start making a lot of mishaps, maybe some wrong decisions that he wouldn't have made without Tenebrous? Is he going to be a bit more, is he going to, no, I don't know what I'm talking about anymore. What's going to happen with subtext? Is he going to try and dismantle them to stop any future interference with the Sith? Is he going to bring them under his command? Who sent that probe? I think it's going to be quite interesting to see where this goes from. It sets up quite a bit and brings up quite a lot of questions that I think is interesting. But stick around. I'm probably going to read chapter 2 either later or tomorrow. I already know what happens in the first 7 chapters, but I want to refresh my memory of what happens. That way it's okay, I'll get the full picture rather than having to rely on my memory of those chapters from a few years back. And even now, reading through that first chapter again, I started picking up on a lot of stuff I didn't pick up on my previous read-throughs of it. So it's going to be interesting to see just what happens in the book. I think I've given myself enough questions to really stay attentive to the book. So yeah, I'm going to give the prologue and chapter 1, because I think my rating will be the same, a really good and quite interesting, and yeah, I think it's going to be a very good book. So I heard a lot of good things about Plagueis, how it's one of the best, if not the best, Star Wars novel, so we'll see how it goes, and I'll keep you all updated. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.